Well, as his government completed 1 month in office today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has blogged that he does not have the luxury of an extended honeymoon period, saying that for him, it was all over in 100 hours. He wrote, every new government has a honeymoon period. Previous governments had the luxury of extending this up to 100 days, even more. Forget 100 days, the series of allegations began in less than 100 hours. He goes on to write, a big challenge I am facing is to convey to a select group of people about our intentions and sincerity to bring a positive change. These are people who are both within and outside the government system. There have been some instances in the last month with which our government had nothing to do, yet these controversies have persisted. But I surely feel that we need to strengthen systems whereby the right things are communicated to the right people at the right time. Well, Shashi Tharoor joins us for this particular segment tonight. Shashi Tharoor, of course, you made headlines weeks ago for your effusive praise of the Modi government within hours of Mr. Modi being sworn in as Prime Minister. How would you then rate the government 1 month into its term? Mr. Tharoor.
Well, I'm not sure I'd accept the characterization of effusive praise. I acknowledged that he said a lot of the right things from his election victory right up to the period that I was speaking about. But having said that, we have seen a very mixed record in the course of this month. You know, we welcomed some of the things that the government had said and done, but it's one thing to say the right thing, the challenge is to do the things right, and we're not quite sure that that's been happening enough. We've been troubled and we have misgivings about some of the actions of the government, the way in which ministers seem to have been bypassed and the Prime Minister dealing directly with secretaries, which raises fundamental questions about our cabinet system of government. When we question ministers in Parliament, are we questioning the people who are actually making the policies? Or are we dealing with a government where the Prime Minister decides everything with the secretaries and the ministers are merely window dressing? We have questions about the way in which governors appear to be being pressed to move in violation of Supreme Court directives. We have concerns not so much about the rail hike and the diesel price hike in themselves, but about the fact that these are the very things the government attacked us for doing when we explained why they had to be done. And now the same government, or that is, when they were the opposition, they attacked us. Here they are, they're doing the same thing. So we have some concerns about the very mixed record we've seen in the first month. But I don't agree that Mr. Modi is not enjoying a honeymoon. I think that the media and the general public have still very much taken to him, and any of us who read the media or look at social media and we dare to say anything critical of the government, we get an enormous backlash immediately. So the honeymoon is still continuing.
Okay, the honeymoon is still continuing. And you know, that was the first thing, Ashok Malik, that struck me as well when I read what Mr. Modi wrote today. When he said that, you know, within hours, the allegations began, you know, pretty much right away. I didn't know what he quite meant with that, because, you know, when I quite agree with Shashi Tharoor there that the media has been actually very sort of full of praise. There have been lots of articles about what you know, good work he's doing, the efficiency of the government, how hard he's personally working. All those things have been there. So it does appear to be that there is some kind of honeymoon period.
No, obviously there is a honeymoon period, but there are three things here. One, Mr. Modi has this running battle with sections of the Delhi establishment or the Delhi media, and it's probably not got over yet. Second, if you looked at some of the controversies, such as the one about Hindi, where there was no imposition of Hindi, but it was presented that way by sections of the media and sections on social media, and he's probably referring to that. Third, when he says there are some sections within the government and without the outside the government who are out to sort of, in a sense, sabotage me or cannot be convinced and persuaded by us, I think he's referring to, perhaps, I'm just guessing here, certain sections of civil servants within the government who he feels are playing dirty. And he is probably privy to more information there than we are. I'm just guessing here.
Okay, but do you, I mean, because, you know, to me, Siddharth Bhatia, it sounded a little like, you know, it's one thing when you're a party that is, you know, contesting an election, and yes, as Ashok rightly points out, there has been this kind of strained relationship between Mr. Modi and sections of the media. But now that the party is in power and he is Prime Minister, there seems to be a sense that you get from this blog that, you know, woe is me, you know, I continue to be targeted. Do you get that sense as well? Do you think that he's fair in making that assessment, that he continues to be victimized? Or do you think that, as Shashi Tharoor said, that there is still a honeymoon? There is quite a honeymoon that's going on.
No, both things are simultaneously possible. And One is, yes, I think the honeymoon is very much on, and it's not just the social media trolls. I think editorials are gingerly criticizing and pointing out that many good things have happened. In fact, I must point out that the railway hike was actually praised by most people. In fact, where it's gone wrong is the sudden withdrawal, the rollback. So that shows that after saying bitter pill and all that kind of thing, this government, backtracked within the first few weeks. So honeymoon is very much there. The second thing is, there is an element of what you said, woe is me, is it's kind of the kitchen is a bit too hot. And that's the kind of statement that comes through. What is the Prime Minister's post if not attracting controversy? I mean, of course it is going to attract controversy, questions, etc. My thing is that my own assessment is, though 30 days is too little, that two major strains have appeared. And one strain is that there seemed to be kind of a haste and lack of preparedness about certain things. And the second is, that's more worrisome, is that something, a kind of thing about going after anything that looks somewhat critical. Gopal Subramaniam case is a little more complex, but certainly this thing about the report about the NGOs was really something that worried. So I think it's a mixed bag. The railway hike, badly handled, but perhaps necessary, and certain other developments which are worrying. If they are not put in place, then if these are not corrected, these impressions, then you are going to get the impression all around that this government cannot stand dissent or independent thinking.
Okay, I'll take this to Chandan Mitra. Then Mr. Mitra, again I come to the honeymoon question first. Do you agree that the allegations began in less than 100 hours? As Siddharth Bhatia said, he is the Prime Minister. A government will always be under much more scrutiny than an opposition party. There will be criticism, there will be scrutiny, and yet there has been so much praise. I mean, even today in the media, there have been articles about the government's good performance in the last 1 month.
Well, I think the media, including those sections that he has pointed out of Delhi society, who were desperately waiting to catch him slip. They wanted him to commit a slip. They said, he's a provincial yokel. What does he know of Delhi? He won't be able to understand Delhi. He can't running India is not the same as running Gujarat. These are two different kettle of fish. He can't do all this. I think they are just waiting for him to slip. And he hasn't slipped up. He hasn't slipped up because he knows that after 12 years of constant demonization in the media, he has to be very careful. I think people understand that. And therefore, what Siddharth was saying and others were also saying, that on the railway budget, steep hike, but still, I don't think there was the outrage or huge kind of protest, because people knew that it had to be done. And people have faith in Mr. Modi. You see, what he has done, the biggest achievement, I think, is to restore authority to the office of the Prime Minister and tell the people that now we have a government, it's a government that works, it's a government that commands authority and will get things done. People understand. People get annoyed and upset when a government is not seen to be taking decisions.
Shashi Tharoor has just said that ministers are being undermined in the process. You have a super
PMO. I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all. I think a new culture is developing in which the bureaucracy and the political appointees and the Prime Minister have to work in tandem. There is no reason to treat one section as superior to the others. The ministers are fully in command. They are deciding policy, but the policies have to be implemented by the secretaries. And Mr. Modi, like Mr. Vajpayee before him, likes to interact with the bureaucracy directly. Nothing wrong with it. But this does not mean that he is going over the heads of the ministers. Ministers are fully in command.
Okay, Amir Raza Hussain, weigh in with your thoughts then. Your report card for the first 1 month. Better than expected? Would you admit that?
There really hasn't been so much to talk about in the first month, except the fact that we are seeing all administrative officers in the government buildings getting out the jhadus and cleaning things up. That's what has been dominating the papers for the last week or so, apart from hike of prices in rail, hike of prices. But again, I think, you know, until the budget is done and through, until the 5 state elections are over, it will be too early to judge what Mr. Modi is really doing. But I want to add that the person who's actually signaled that the honeymoon is over is Mr. Modi himself. He suddenly came out of the blue and said, "Yo, I have so many things to do which people will not like, but people will start hating me, but soon they will start loving me again." And he's the one who in fact let all of us know that he is going to be bringing a harsh budget and prices are going to rise beyond expectations. So he's the one who's ended the honeymoon, nobody else.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I just wanted to ask Shashi Tharoor then that, you know, on the question of the ministers and the bureaucracy, you know, many people do see it the way Chandan Mitra sees it, that Mr. Modi is cutting through the red tape. You know, this is going to be a much more decisive government. It's a smaller council of ministers. Things are getting done. And they have the unfortunate contrast to make with the previous government. Mr. Tharoor.
Well, look, let me say that we have a cabinet system of government. I mean, maybe Mr. Modi would like to change that one day, but for the moment, this is what we have. And in our parliamentary system of accountability, the ministers are responsible for their portfolios and are accountable to Parliament for them. So one of the reasons that in question are we question ministers is because they're supposed to be the people who are responsible. So when Chandan says you can't give one a superior position, I'm sorry, our constitution does give one a superior position. Our national political practice gives them a superior position. So if Mr. Modi wants to meet with secretaries, it's his prerogative. But he must not leave the ministers out as he did. He cannot leave out the ministers, meet with the secretaries, and then expect the MPs in Parliament to think that the ministers are the right people to ask questions to, because very clearly the Prime Minister can bypass the ministers when he meets the secretaries. That is simply not the way the cabinet system is supposed to be. It's only one example. It's early days yet, but it's one example of the kinds of things that give us disquiet.
Yes, Mr. Mitra, yes.
Shashi, 1 second. You know, I really must thank you from the bottom of my heart for reminding us on the very day that the emergency was imposed many years ago that we have a cabinet system of government. I am really delighted that you have discovered it after losing power after 10 years. And I mean, that cabinet, however, did not include one person who took all the decisions, not secretaries, not the ministers. Somebody else outside both the cabinet as well as the bureaucracy took the decisions in your time. So to suddenly shed crocodile tears over who is being overruled and who is not being consulted, I think ill behoves the Congress party.
I think the point...
No, I'm sure, Chandan, this is simple politics. I really have to respond to this.
You can't invoke the emergency here.
Really first, then Mr. Sen.
Exactly,
yes.
it's in it. Let me just make the point that in the UPA, cabinet ministers were responsible for their portfolios, piloted their own policies, their own bills, had to lobby for them. Some did better than others, but everyone was accountable. As far as influences outside the government were concerned, there were political influences on the party. I'm afraid that we are quite concerned about influences on this particular ruling party from Nagpur, from the RSS. So it's not as if these influences in the present regime are not there. Okay, so my point is that when policies are presented by ministers, the ministers can be challenged. And believe me, we will be challenging these ministers, and they won't be able to take refuge behind their own ignorance because the Prime Minister left them out.
What about the policies? What about the policies that were ordered to be carried out?
I just want to come to this point about the fact that you have clearly a Prime Minister who is wields much more authority than his predecessor did. It's a very PMO-centric government, and one of the things, Ashok Malik, that emerges from that is, and as journalists we see this every day, is that while in a sense this is a very communicative government in that so many ministers are on Twitter, the PM himself, there's a constant barrage of press releases. At the same time, there's a kind of an information wall. Ministers are not really interacting with reporters who cover the ministries. There is really no question and answer that is going on. There is no media advisor. So there's not really anybody to call up and speak to if you have a query. Everything is controlled through the press releases that essentially this government wants to put out. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
There are two things here. Before I answer that, I'd like to go back to the PMO. India has a cabinet system of government and not a presidential system, certainly. But we've had strong PMOs. Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee ran very strong PMOs that had oversight over individual ministries. In the last government, the UPA government, a former coal secretary has written in his book that when his minister was up to no good, he went to the Prime Minister to complain, but found no support. So Mr. Modi has reached out to secretaries in that context. There is a certain context to why he's acted in the manner he has.
What about information
Second,
and
coming
transparency?
to information and communication, I think one of the principal drawbacks of this government in the first 1 month, it's done a lot of good things, but one drawback has been the absence of political communication. That certainly is the case, given that Mr. Modi runs such a high-octane and very communicative and proactively communicative campaign. The contrast has been felt. And I'm sure in his blog today he refers to communication being something which needs to be worked on. I think that is something that needs to be worked on fairly quickly.
Okay, so you agree on that point. Amir
But
Raza
more than a
Hussain.
media advisor or a bureaucrat,
No,
I think it should be a politician who should communicate.
Exactly, but I think even if it's ministers, the fact that very few of them have actually given interviews, very few, you can count the number of people.
But some of them are probably just getting used to the new portfolio, to be fair.
The sense once
there needs to be
more transparency on that. Yes, Amir Raza Hussain, yes. And then Shashi Tharoor, yes.
Yeah, we are actually told that there are a handful of ministers who are actually allowed to speak to the press. So we hear their statements every day. We have a home minister who couldn't choose his own PS. So, there are 3 or 4 ministers who we are told, that's the gossip around the city, who are permitted by the Prime Minister to speak to the press because he feels that they will not drop a brick. The rest of the people have a gag order on them. So, of course, we were expecting a PMO-centric government, and it is a PMO-centric government. But, yes, I think not allowing his ministers the ability to speak, to interact with the press, I think that's going a little too far.
Okay, Shashi Tharoor, and then I'll come to Siddharth, yes.
Nidhi, yes, well, Amir has actually done me the favor of making the point I wanted to interject when Ashok Malik said that there have been PMO-strong governments in the past. There is simply no precedent in any strong PMO for a minister of the cabinet not to be allowed to appoint his own private secretary, as has happened to 4 ministers just now. This is really unprecedented, where the PMO can and does appoint a director who has served in the previous PMO as a director, but refuses to allow even the Home Minister of the country and the Minister of State for Home to appoint PSs. This is quite startling. And the second point is indeed the gag order. When you have ministers saying to the press, I'm not at liberty to speak on something, and that something happens to be square on in their portfolio, then you really have a question of serious doubts about political communication. Now, we agree that it's only 1 month and these are only straws in the wind, but they raise profound doubts. And I think for us to simply speak as if we're not giving the Prime Minister his due and not giving him the honeymoon he deserves is unfair, because these are specific actions whose repercussions have already been felt within these 30 days.